we are in the month of June. We are going through the tray of success of this, of taking responsibility for our lives. And as we do that, what we're doing is we're also looking at how we can identify and admit some of the issues we have in our lives, so we can correct them in our lives, take responsibility, and grow as we age in our life. As long as we continue to have these same patterns over and over again with things without taking responsibility for them, what happens is we are doomed to continue to have the same consequences over and over and over. So through this month, what we're doing is we're looking at 4 different ways that we tend to make excuses, or we tend to avoid taking responsibility for different things that happen in our lives that are our fault. So the first week we looked at this is the first way we avoid responsibility is we tend to compare ourselves to other people that we view as lesser than us. So instead of taking responsibility for our failures, we look at them and go, well, they're a worse failure than me, so there's nothing I need to correct here, all right? The second week, which was last week, what we looked at is we looked at how we tend to blame others to avoid responsibility. So we look at other people, and when we have failings, when we have things that we drop the ball on, we try to put that on someone else, and we try to blame someone else so we don't have to deal with it, and we don't have to step up and accept responsibility personally. Today, in the third week, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the way we avoid responsibility, which is we're simply just blinded to it. It's just something we don't see, we're unaware of it, and we're just blinded to it. You see, in our lives, we all have some things that we assume are right, that we assume are correct, that might actually not be. That might be false, they might be incorrect, they might not be things that are true at all, but we're just simply unaware of them because we're misinformed or we're blinded to it. For example, what I have 8 things here that I'm going to put on the screen in a second. And all I want you to do is this. If you think they are true, I'll ask you if you think this one's true, raise your hand, because I want to point out some things that we have some false understandings about, all right? So here's the game, 8 of them. We'll see how many of these you get right and how many you potentially get wrong. Here's the first one. Chameleons change color to match their surroundings. If that is true, raise your hand up. All right, you're all wrong, all right? Here's why chameleons change actually their colors. It's either mood, temperature, or it's a way of communication. Very rarely do they actually change their colors according to their surroundings. It's all about different things. Temperature, how they're feeling, or if they're trying to communicate to other chameleons. See, you thought you knew, and you really don't. And some of you are like, no, he's wrong. I'm right. I'm just telling you, I'm right on this one. Okay, here we go. Next one, the Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure that can be seen from space. How many of you know that to be true? Okay, you're wrong. All right, actually, there's no man-made structure. Somewhere that became a wise tale. It's something a lot of people have accepted. I used to believe that as well, but it's actually not true. There is no man-made thing that can actually be seen from space. So that is an incorrect understanding. The next one is this. There's a permanent dark side to the moon. Raise your hand if you believe that one. True? Permanent dark side to the moon? There is not, all right? There is a permanent side of the moon that constantly faces us, but the other side of it's not always dark. It's just like anything else. It's rotating around the sun as well, and it gets light and it gets dark. That's why you don't see the moon all the time, all right? So there is a side of the moon that always faces us. The other side is not always dark, though, like a lot of people assume. Next one. We use only about 10% of our brains from scientific research. How many of you know that one? Incorrect. All right? Actually, they have found out we use about 94% of our brains. They just operate at different times and not always firing all at the same time, but they're all operating. They all have important things that they're doing. They're just not always firing at the exact same moment. So we use about 94% of our brains. So if you were always holding out for that day that they figure out how to unlock the other 90%, I'm sorry to tell you, you're not going to get much better. It's just where we are, all right? So that's how it's going to be. Next one, bats are blind. True? No, bats aren't blind. They actually see about as well as humans do, but they fly around in the dark. So they use their I know it's sonar, but it's not called echolocation. Echolocation that they use with their ears, and that's how they get around instead of with their eyes because they're always in the dark. Next one is this. If you touch a baby bird, you'll make its mother reject it. How many of you know that one? How many of you told your kids this one? I used to believe this. I'm a city kid. If a country person tells me that's how it works, I believe that's how it works, all right? So it used to be said if you touch a baby bird, like people tell you, don't touch the bird, because if you touch the bird and put it back in the nest, its mother will reject it because it smells a human on it, and then it doesn't want to be around the human. Well, birds really don't have a good sense of smell, so it doesn't really matter. So you can touch baby birds, and you can play with them, and then put them back in their nest before mom gets home, and they're all good. All right? So kids, there you go. Kira, anytime you want to play baby birds, just make sure they're back in the nest before mom gets home. So she's a what? Oh, if you're allergic, maybe not, Kira. All right, so that's the bird one. Next one, bulls are enraged by the color red. So you're all starting to learn now. Don't accept any of these. Actually, a lot of people think that. That's why you use the red thing, and they go after red. It has nothing to do with the red. Bulls actually only see yellows and blues. It's the whole movement of the thing that makes them actually get enraged and come and charge at it. Has nothing to do with the color. There you go. See, you are going to be smarter people when you leave here today on Father's Day. Here's the next one and the last one. If you drop a penny from the top of the Empire State Building, you can kill someone. How many of you have heard that and believe that? All right? Actually not true. It would fly down, it would probably bounce off their head, and they go, oh, something just hit me. Maybe it was a penny. Because the penny's kind of wide with the wind and stuff like that, catches the wind, it doesn't really accelerate that fast because it catches the wind and it slows it all down. So it wouldn't really hurt anyone. You just feel it nick you as if someone threw a penny at you from across the room, and you'd be like, oh, that hurt. But it wouldn't actually do any damage. All right, here's the point. We all have blind spots in our lives that can prevent us from taking responsibility. We all have incorrect information that we operate from. We have different hurtful behaviors that we do not recognize about ourselves. And we have sinful thoughts and actions in our lives that we are unaware of, so that we are blinded to them. They're not usually done purposely. They're basically done out of ignorance. We're just not aware of them, but they are there in our lives. But if we want to continue to grow in our lives, we have to continually be looking to identify what those blind spots are and learn to take responsibility for them. Otherwise, what will happen is we are doomed to continue to suffer the consequences of them, and our lives are doomed to continue to go through that system, or those that we live with and those that are around us a lot are doomed to suffer the consequences from those actions. So if you are married, you have seen this lots of times, right? How many of you have ever seen your spouse that is unaware of something that causes issues in your marriage, right? You learn that. You live with someone, and you're ignorant of it. It's just how you grew up. It's how you are. It's part of your personality. It's part of how you are, and it drives your spouse nuts. Autumn has a ton of those. I'm always like, Autumn, you got to stop. I think she's found one in me over the years, but she's loaded with them, all right? So I always am making her aware of all of her failures so she can get better. I'm just kidding. I am the best father, husband you've ever seen. I would never do that. So anyways, we see that in relationships all the time. So what we're going to do today is this. I'm going to take you through an extreme example from the Bible of blindness to someone's behavior and how it affects everyone else, that it's completely blinded to it. And like I said, this is an extreme example, but the same way this guy has a blind spot in his life, we all have them too in just different areas. Hopefully none like his, but we all have similar things where we just don't see what we're doing and how it affects everyone else because we get tunnel vision. So his name is David. You will find this story in 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. This is the same David that we talked about a few weeks ago that actually kills Goliath. He's an older man now. He is actually the king of Israel. And as a king of Israel, the first thing we're going to see in this account in 2 Samuel 11 and 12 is his sin and what the issue is at first, all right? Now, what happens at the beginning of chapter 11 is this. David sends his army out in the early spring to kind of go fight a campaign. And what's kind of unique here is this. David does not go with them, and he stays actually back in the capital and stays in the palace and sends his men out, which was unusual because usually he traveled with them as a king to these different battles and to the different campaigns that they were doing, and he stuck with the men. This time he stays back for whatever reason, and he's in his palace. What we see, the next part of the story is this. It says he's taking a mid-afternoon nap. So he's kind of gotten lazy here. So one, he doesn't go fight with his army. Two, he's kind of getting lazy, and he's taking naps in the afternoon. So he wakes up in the afternoon after a nice long nap, and it says he kind of goes out to the top of his roof of the palace that looks over the whole city. And while he's up there, he sees a beautiful woman who's bathing at the time. And her name is Bathsheba. So he goes up there, and he sees this lady bathing. We don't know how. Some people speculate she had a bathtub on the roof because she had a higher roof, so that was kind of her private area. Or with his roof being higher, he can see through windows or whatever else. But for whatever reason, he's up on the roof, and he sees her taking a bath at the time. So what David does is this. He actually sends one of his guys over and goes, see that house over there? Go over there and find out who that woman is. I need to know who she is. So he sends the guy out. The guy comes back and gives him a report, and he says, basically, it's this guy's named Uriah, and he knows, this is the thing, he knows who Uriah is. This is one of his most loyal soldiers that he has in his army. In the book of Samuel and in the book of Kings, somewhere in there, when David's being chased around, it gives a list of some of his most loyal and best fighters, and Uriah is one of them. Okay, so what we know is David knows who Uriah is. He's incredibly loyal. He has saved David's life multiple times, fought side by side with David, so he knows who Uriah is. And he goes, okay, so that's who it is. And he says, go back, bring her back to the palace, because Uriah is not home. So he's out fighting a war for David, all right? So he brings her back to the palace. The servant brings her back to the palace. That evening, David actually sleeps with her. After he sleeps with her, a short time later, she actually sends word back to David that she has become pregnant. And so we have set up the original sin here, which is this. David has now had an affair with one of his soldiers' wives, he is sent away to war while he's back in the palace enjoying life, and he sleeps with her wife, and now she is pregnant. So that's how chapter 11 starts off. That gets into the next part, which is the cover-up. So David, realizing kind of what he has done at this point, goes, this isn't good, because he wouldn't try to cover it up if he didn't realize that. So still at this point in David's life, he realizes something's not right about this. So he starts to try to cover it up. So here's what he does. He sends a servant back to the army and says, hey, go to the army, tell the general or whatever to send Uriah back and have him give me a detailed report of what's going on in the campaign right now. So would you send him back from the front lines to come see me? So they go get Uriah. He comes back from the front lines. David gets a report from him, and he says, hey, Uriah, before you go back to the front lines and take off, why don't you just stay the night at home, go home to your wife, and just, stay there for the night, and then you can head back in the morning. So David's thinking here is, I need to get Uriah home with his wife as quickly as I can, so when she ends up pregnant, he thinks it's his. Okay, that's what he's doing. So he sends him out, he sends him home. What happens is the next day, Uriah gets ready to leave, and David gets word that Uriah never went home, that he actually slept at the gates of the palace and slept there during the night. So David goes, what's going on? And he brings him back to him before he takes off and says, Uriah, why didn't you go home? I said you could go home to your wife and you could just have a nice night before going back to the front lines. And Uriah basically tells him, David, I can't. I can't do it. My guys are sleeping in tents. They're in a battle right now. I can't do that to my guys. I'm not going to disrespect my guys and tell them I got to go home and be at my home with my wife and everything and have a nice meal. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that to my guys with my integrity. That would just undercut them. So what you see here is this. Uriah is a good guy, okay? A guy of integrity, an incredible military guy, an incredible soldier of respect. So he says no. So David says, Uriah, here's the deal. I need you to stick around for the day, and I'm going to send you back tomorrow. I need you to stay in town for the night. So what happens is that evening he actually invites Uriah back over to the palace, and then he gets him drunk. So he liquors him up, feeds them, and then after he gets them really drunk, he says, just go home for the night, stay at home for the evening, and then you can go back to the front lines in the evening. So David sends him off again, thinking, I've got this thing solved now. He's going to go home. I got him drunk, so he's not thinking clearly. He'll go home and be with Bathsheba. What happens at that point, it says, he wakes up next morning and finds out Uriah slept at the gates of the palace again and still went, I can't do that. Even though he's drunk, he still can't go home and be with his wife. So David says, okay, well, you need to go back to the front line. So he sends him back, and this is where the story gets really dark. So far you go, David's a real jerk. This is terrible. We're going to a whole different place now, okay? This is what I call the dark part of the story. So David says, Uriah, I'm going to send you back, but I have this letter, and I need you to give that to your general when you get back. It's some important information for him. So go deliver this to your general. It's some war plans and stuff like that. Give it to him on your way back. Knowing Uriah is a guy of integrity, he's not going to look at this thing. He's not going to check it out. So he gives it to one of his most trusted men. Uriah takes it back. And in the letter we find out is this. He has written a letter to his general and says, when you get back, what I need you to do in the next day's campaign and the next battle you have, take Uriah's unit, and I need you to put them in the most fierce fighting part of the battle. And then when they get out there, I need you guys to withdraw from them so that Uriah is killed. And this is in his letter. This is what he writes. Put his men out front. When you get them out there and they engage, withdraw and leave them there so that they are killed off. All right? So the general reads this thing. He obeys the king's orders. He doesn't know what's going on. political thing or whatever else. He doesn't know. So next day's fighting, they go out. Uriah's men are put in the front, right in the fiercest part of the fighting. The Israelite army withdraws from them and leaves them stranded, and they are wiped out and they are killed. The general says, I need you to go take back this report to the king and let him know some of your best troops were wiped out and they died in this specific part of the battle. And the messenger at this point is actually a little confused and scared because he goes, I can't tell the king this because this looks really bad and he's going to get ticked off and he's going to take it out on me. And what the general tells him is this: after you tell the king this, let him know that Uriah the Hittite or whatever, Uriah the Hittite, he was killed in the battle as well. And he says, and everything will be okay for you. So the guy goes back, he meets up with David, he lets David know, here's the deal. This group went in, they got caught out there, our guys withdrew, they actually got caught, they died. We're really sorry, King, there's some of our best troops, best unit that we had out there. Really sorry about that. And then he says, but just so you know as well, Uriah the Hittite was part of that group and he passed away as well. He was killed in that battle. And David says to him, oh, that's just tough. Man, we'll try better next time and we'll try not to make that same mistake again. That's kind of his response. Because David now is going, I solved my issue. All right? So Uriah is killed, and the way chapter 11 ends is this. These are the last words of chapter 11, because what happens is this: Bathsheba at this point mourns. She finds out her husband's dead. She goes in the morning. After her mourning, it says David goes over and he takes her as his wife, and she becomes one of his many wives. All right? And the last words of the chapter are this: but the Lord was displeased with what David had done. Slight understatement. Okay? It says the Lord was displeased with what David had done. Yeah, I would think so. He's now committed adultery and he now has murdered her husband and taken her as his own wife to cover up for himself. And he's done all this and he's kind of cool with it. And now he just goes on with his life. That gets into chapter 12. And what happens in chapter 12 is this: you get the confrontation. What God does is God has a prophet named Nathan. And he says, Nathan, I need you to go talk to the king. So he says, okay, what's my message? And God gives him this message, and he goes to David, and he gets before him. And he says, David, I have a little story to tell you. And David says, go ahead, shoot, what's your story? And he says, okay, let me tell you about the story. There's this poor guy, and there's this really rich guy. And now there's this poor guy over here, and he has a baby lamb. And he has this lamb, and he treated it as one of his own kids. And it's the only thing of value he had. It's the only thing he cared about in the world is he had this baby lamb. And it was him and his family and this lamb. And he took great care of it. He fed it. He played with it. Ate at his dinner table with him. He treated this thing as one of his own. Some of you know what this is like. Stephen, right? Your little fur babies, your little boxers. Some of you. Annie's got a little pig, but you got rid of the pig. But you had your little pig, right? And then we have over here Mrs. Hearn, right? They're talking right now. We have Miss Animal Lover of all animal lovers over here. How many cats do you own? 3 cats now. Now you have one on Facebook, your newest one. And how many guinea pigs? 3 guinea pigs. What else do you own? Birds, dogs, anything else? Chickens. All right. And she treats all these as little humans. All right. This is what Nathan puts out as his story is. There's this guy and he has a lamb. It's not a bird, it's not a dog. He has this lamb, but he treats it as one of his own kids, as part of the family. And David goes, oh, that's cool. He's got a little baby lamb. And he says, okay, so here's the deal. The rich guy someday has a guy come to his house, just has a visitor stop in at his house, and the rich guy wants to have a nice little meal for him. So he actually sends his servants out, and he takes the little poor guy's lamb and takes it and kills it for their meal and slaughters it and feeds it to his host. And that's what they serve for dinner that night. David, when he hears that, goes crazy and goes, are you serious? Is that really what that guy did? And he goes, yeah. The rich guy took the poor guy's lamb, and he killed that for their food that night. And David's response is this. He basically says, the rich guy deserves to die. That guy deserves to die. He's entitled. He's insensitive. I cannot believe he did that. And the way it ends is Nathan looks at him and says, David, you know what? You're the rich guy. And right there, what it says, you can see this whole scenario. If you play it out in your mind, I can just imagine this. And Nathan going, hey, David, you know what you're saying about him? You're him. And he says, you know who Uriah is? You know who Bathsheba is? And at that point, you see basically David's eyes are open for the first time. And David at this time realizes what he's done. And I don't know how up to this point he wasn't aware of it, But somehow David had become blind to this sin and this behavior in his life. And it's at this point his eyes are finally opened after all this. And he's kind of devastated. Which then leads us to the question of this. When our eyes are actually open to a blind spot we have in our life, and someone reveals it to us, or the Spirit reveals it to us, how should we respond? So we have a blind spot. It could be a behavior. It could be all sorts of different things. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But it could be all sorts of different things. God reveals it to us through a person or through a spirit. How do we respond? The cool thing about the Bible and the story of David is this. We have firsthand information of how David responded to it. All right? If you go to the book of Psalms, in the book of Psalms, there's a lot of them that are written by David himself. One of them is Psalms 51. The way Psalms 51 is introduced, it's not one of the verses, it's kind of the title over it. It says this, a psalm of David regarding the time Nathan the prophet came to him after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba. Okay? So Psalm 51, we have the information from the Bible that says this is what David wrote after Nathan revealed to him what he had done with Bathsheba and brought it out to the open and opened his eyes of what he was doing. So what I'm going to do this morning, I'm not going to talk anything about it. I'm going to read Psalm 51 to you. Because it's David, how he deals when his eyes are revealed with this thing that he has done, and him of how he takes responsibility for it and how he reacts to it. So here it is, Psalm 51. Let me read it to you. It says this, have mercy on me, O God, because of your unfailing love. Because of your great compassion, blot out the stain of my sins. Wash me clean from my guilt. Purify me from my sin. For I recognize my rebellion. It haunts me day and night. Against you and you alone have I sinned. I have done what is evil in your sight. Real quick, let me stop there for a moment. It's interesting that he says, it's not Uriah, it's not Bathsheba, it's against you. I failed you. I sinned against you and you alone. Yeah, he hurt other people in the whole process, but he realized and takes the responsibility. It was you. I did this directly to you, God. Then he goes on, he says, you will be proved right in what you say, and your judgment against me is just. For I was born a sinner, yes, from the moment my mother conceived me. But you desire honesty from the womb. Teach me wisdom even there. Purify me from my sins, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Oh, give me back my joy again. You have broken me. Now let me rejoice. Don't keep looking at my sins. Remove the stain of my guilt. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. I find this very interesting here where he says this. He says, God, you got to create a new heart in me. I need you to develop something new in me, a new passion, a new desire for your ways, because, man, I've messed it up and I went way off the tracks. And he says, so God, give me back to my joy again. You've broken me. He says, don't keep looking at my sin. Receive, in verse 10, create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit in me. Verse 11, do not banish me from your presence and take your Holy Spirit from me. Kind of interesting. How many of you have ever been in a spot before where you messed up to the point where you get, God, please don't leave me. God, don't leave me. That's where David is. David's going, God, don't leave me. I know I messed this thing up. Don't leave me. Please don't banish me from your presence. Verse 12, he says, restore to me the joy of my salvation and make me willing to obey you. Then I will teach your ways to rebels, and they will return to you. Here's the next interesting part. Now he shifts after admitting responsibility, after going, God, you got to clean me up. God, don't leave me, but help me. Now he's going to shift here in verse 12 where he starts going, and make me a witness for you to the rest of the world for the rest of my life. Let me tell of your ways. Use me again. Don't just put me on the back burner. Please still use me. He says, restore to me to joy my salvation, make me willing to obey you. Verse 13, then I will teach your ways of rebels, and they will return to you. Forgive me for shedding blood, O God who saves. Then I will joyfully sing of your forgiveness. Unseal my lips, O Lord, that my mouth may praise you. You do not desire a sacrifice, or I would offer one. You do not want a burnt offering. The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. You will not reject a broken, repentant heart, O God. That's his words after Nathan opens up his eyes to the blindness of his sin. I love towards the end here where he basically says this in verse 17. He says, The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. He says, you don't desire a sacrifice here and there. What he's saying is this: God, I understand you enough. You just don't want me to go correct some situation, do that, and that's all. God, that's not what you want. You don't want just some sacrifice, so I do a token thing and goes, there, I paid my debt. He's going, what you want from me is a broken heart, a heart that's destroyed that you can rebuild, that you can build back up in your image the way you want it built. You don't want me to just do some little thing out here that's symbolism. You want me to change the core of who I am. You want my heart gone the way it was. You want it dead. You want it broken so you can piece it back together. And that's kind of how he ends it. Here's the thing. We all need to be open to having a Nathan put in our lives from time to time. Someone who's willing to point out a fault that we have become blind to. We need to be open to those people. The reason I say that is this. A lot of times when God puts a Nathan in our life, we resist them. We put up barriers between them and go, don't say that about me. Don't tell me about that. That's not something I want to change. It's something I become comfortable with. Don't tell me I have a problem there. And what I'm telling you is we have to learn to be okay and look forward to, at times, having God put a Nathan into our lives that reveals some of our blindness that's sick in our lives. It might be a habit you have that you are unaware of. It's just something you do. It might be a personality trait. Hey, God created us with personality traits, but every personality trait has good things and bad things. And sometimes someone needs to point out to us that's a bad part of that personality trait and you need to work on it. And we need to be open to it. Sometimes it's a destructive behavior. It's something we are totally unaware of what we're doing, but we're destroying the lives around us, all around, every place we go, and we don't even know we're doing it, but other people can look at it and go, man, that's a really destructive behavior. And sometimes it's an addiction that we just can't get over. It's something we can't seem to break, that someone needs to come in and we got comfortable with and just start accepting as, well, it's just okay, it's just how God made me. That you need a Nathan to come in and go, no, that's not acceptable. That's not right. Or maybe it's just something else. But when your eyes are opened up to it, we need to take responsibility for it, and we need to learn to pray like David prayed. To pray a prayer of humility, of going, God, I'm sorry, it's all on me. I did it to you. God, please do not remove yourself from do not remove me from your presence. God, please remake me, restore me, make me into the person you want me to be. And God, after you do that, I swear I will go around and I will tell the world about who you are. I will tell the world about your grace and your mercy and your forgiveness. I will be that person. So God, restore me to the person you want me to be. That's what we need to learn to do when our eyes are open to our blindness. Because when we do that, what we find is this. It's at that point God can restore us, he can renew us, he can mold us, and he can use us for his glory once again. Because as long as we deny responsibility for these things, we limit God's ability to use us. Let me ask you a quick question. David, before his eyes were open, could God do anything with that man at that point? Could God do anything with that guy? He's an adulterer, he's a murderer, and he's totally unaware of it, and he's gone on to just go, it's fine. My life's good. I've got this new wife. Everything's cool. Could God have done anything kingdom-worthy with David at that point? No. But we know after this prayer, after this time, that God still uses David to do incredible things for the kingdom of God. Why? Because when David's eyes were open, he went to God and he went, God, I got to lay it all out. And I need you to fix me. I can't do this on my own. He took responsibility and he allowed God to renew him and recreate him and turn him into the person that God desired him to be originally. That needs to be our desires so we can do the kingdom work God desires for us to achieve. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,